Operation Metro, Argonne Forest, Fort de Vaux, Operation Locker. What do all of these Battlefield maps have in common? Well, I think a few things actually. They seem to be some of the most popular maps in their respective games, but also they are arguably the complete opposite of what you would say is a classic Battlefield map. Why is that? And why do players love these maps so much? Metro is the perfect example, and this got me thinking. Now, I'm sure if you've played BF3 or 4, at some point you've come across a 64-player Metro only server and experienced all of the delights and frustrations that it has to offer. Operation Locker for BF4 is also very similar. First of all, they're infantry only maps, but more to the point, they are also incredibly linear, and I would perhaps use the term grindy. If I had to ask you what you thought made a Battlefield map, I imagine that most players would say, well, it's obvious, isn't it, Jack? Large scale arena with open areas, urban areas, and combat with vehicles. I think that would be the response from most people. Now, map design apart, because I know that they are very subjective, I would argue that these maps go against that mantra quite significantly. And yet, for some reason, they are some of the most popular maps in recent times. Metro was one of the most popular maps, if not the most popular in BF3. And I feel that's why it was one of the remastered maps in BF4. And its popularity is also the reason that we got new maps such as Operation Locker, and in a certain light, Fort Vaux. I'm also not saying that these maps are bad or anything along those lines. In fact, I do love Operation Locker with smaller player counts. I just find it quite interesting why players flocked to a map that for all its intents and purposes is not a classic Battlefield map. I think in BF3, players would often jump onto Metro as a way to grind out all sorts of assignments and medals. If you needed to get a certain amount of revives or kills with a certain weapon or whatever the assignment or medal may have been, it was usually significantly easier and perhaps a lot faster to do it on a map that had an abundance of players running around in a small area. Maybe you wanted to get that new weapon unlock. And players would run up to the red stairs on the right hand side of Metro, pop down a medical crate or an ammo crate and just watch the points rack up. But that on its own doesn't make that map a good one. It does, however, make it a map of opportunity. In fact, I think right now, Breakthrough is probably one of the better modes for getting assignments done in the current Battlefield game we have at BF5, especially when lots of the assignments require either attacking or defensive kills, which can be annoying at times, but it's a very similar premise. Players will flock towards something that makes their so-called grind easier and faster. But what was it about Metro then? Well, I think Metro plays really well when you play it on 32 players. I think it can be a great map with 32 players, and if you lower the player count further, I think it gets better and better. We used to play it quite a lot in 5v5s back in the day when we played BF3 online in ESL versus or competitions, and it was a tough map to get past the B point if a good team were holding it, but that was the best part of the challenge, and that was just 5v5. 64 players on the other hand is another beast entirely. That being said, there were numerous 64 player Metro 24/7 servers around in the BF3 and BF4 days, and you can't imagine all of those players are only on there to level up or rank up. There had to be something about the map. They had to be enjoying it, right? Otherwise, why would they be doing it? It reminds me a little bit of Grand Operations. Lots of players all in one small area of a map, defending or attacking. Now, some players love that style of play, whereas others hate it. Some think it feels like war, although I'd argue wars aren't really fought like that. Obviously, this is a game, but that's a different topic entirely. Or how about this? Maybe people just enjoyed it because there were no vehicles and it was just infantry, your skill with the guns, the movement and the gadgets at your disposal. No tanks to worry about, no LAVs and no attack helicopter in the sky orbit bombing you. Perhaps the infantry only part was just the appeal and a refreshing change for people who didn't really enjoy that aspect of Battlefield. Now, for me personally, I don't particularly enjoy Metro or Lockers, let's say, when it gets too grindy and chaotic. grenades everywhere all the time, too many players to deal with and tactics just go out the window. But that's just me. When there are so many explosions going off all the time, especially in BF3, when your entire screen would shake and throw suppression into the mix, I just don't enjoy it. Having said that, if you do manage to somehow squeeze past the defences and duke 30 odd players, and maybe you would mow them all down with an M249 or put some C4 down and get a 10 bang, who knows. It is pretty satisfying, especially if you and your team manage to turn the tide. One other place that I thought Metro really worked well was 32 player rush. When you were attacking, it was an absolute blast. The flow from going outside into the tunnels and then back outside again meant for some hectic tactical infantry gameplay, and with 32 players it just felt right, and there were some incredible moments like there. Now, maps in the Battlefield franchise are extremely hot and cold and very subjective. Let's take a look at Suez in BF1 for example. Suez might not have the tight corridors of Operation Locker or the train tracks of Metro, but it still very much is a smaller meat grinder map at times. If you remember when BF1 launched, there was just a ton of complaints about Suez. So much so that the map got a small rework, and even still, lots of players, or it seemed as though lots of players, wanted it changed and improved again. Now, I saw a tweet recently from Battlefield level designer Matt Wagner saying that one of the reasons Suez never got another rework was that it was a popular map and the balance was right as far as they were concerned. Some loud people wanted a change, but the actions of the community didn't seem to align with the loud few opinions. What we have to remember is that DICE have all the data they could possibly want at their disposal. And not only that, but when map voting came into place in BF1, they had a system whereby they could definitely see how maps were stacking up against each other in multiple votes. If players are constantly selecting Suez and DICE's data suggests there's a good flow of people, kills, flag captures and whatnot, then it's pretty hard to disagree even if we don't see it ourselves. Interestingly, if you remember in BF4, night maps at one point were all the rage. It was something a lot of players wanted, and I was really invested to see how they could work because I thought that they might look fantastic. And then this carries across to Battlefield 1, but the night maps there aren't anywhere near as popular as you might think, and thanks to the voting systems that became quite apparent. From what I've read online, Nouvelle Nights was the least popular map in the game. But one of the best infantry experiences I can remember in Battlefield was not on an infantry map at all, and that was Strike at Karkand. And of course that was a BF2 map, and there it was incredible. I felt as though the infantry combat on that map was great, but tankers could do their thing too, although I found that for the most part I was encountering infantry more than anything else. To me, that map was a perfect example of a blend of infantry and vehicle combat. Seine Crossing and Grand Bazaar are probably two others. I absolutely love Seine Crossing, but an APC can cause real havoc around those streets if not dealt with. That being said, they don't really have that much room to manoeuvre, so the room for error was smaller. The alleyway in Grand Bazaar, on the other hand, was a stomping grounds for as long as I can remember. Countless fights and battles have taken place among those walls and the rugs. I just feel bad for the guys who were trying to sell the rugs. More recently, there's a map in BF5 called Devastation that offers up predominantly infantry combat, but there are still a few armour opportunities thrown in there. But it has to be said that for the most part this is an infantry map, and that's fine. I don't see any other issue with having a few maps that lean towards one or the other. Just look at Panzerstorm. I mean, obviously that's a vehicle map all day long. And BF5 at the moment doesn't have a complete infantry only map. At least not yet. BF1 had Argonne Forest and Fort Vaux, BF4 had Operation Locker. Operation Metro was the order of the day for BF3, and of course some of the maps in close quarters. All of those maps were great at certain times, but also a grindfest at others. Is it not possible to have an infantry only map that's a bit more sprawling? Something more along the lines of Seine Crossing or Strike at Karkand, perhaps some light transport vehicles but no armour or planes. I think some players wouldn't really like that though. Maybe they'd think that, hey, that's not Battlefield, but I think that the maps have proven, if they're infantry only, to be popular, and perhaps in BF5 they would shine in a different light. That being said, the most perfect solution is a map that works great for infantry and vehicles at the same time, but of course that's easier said than done. I will say this though, Fort de Vaux in BF1 was pretty horrible if your team managed to get spawn trapped, but for the most part it was a close quarters infantry map that actually flowed pretty well because there were numerous heights and elevations and routes around the map And while there were choke points, I think for the most part it was much easier to find flanking routes around the enemies than it ever was on maps like Metro and even Lockers, because they were just so linear. Now, going back to my original point about Metro, it was one of the standout maps on BF3's launch because, like I said, it was used to promote the game early on, and it featured as a rush map. In fact, I think, going back to that for just a second, it definitely operates better as a rush map. In fact, rush was just so much fun on Metro, providing that you don't have too many players crowding the points. But what about this? Operation Metro 1944 in BF5. It's possible. Would players enjoy something along those lines? I don't know. For me, I'm kind of getting sick of reworked content, but let's be fair, players would jump all over Wake Island, so maybe this wouldn't be any different. For me personally, I'd love to see the map designers create new stuff, but there's always going to be a crowd there who would love to revisit the older meat grinders. Wrapping things up, if I asked 100 people what they thought of 64-player Operation Metro on Conquest, I imagine that a lot of them would say it was a bad experience, but the amount of players who played it each and every day, and the fact that it was one of the most popular maps of Battlefield 3, means that clearly players enjoyed it. For me, it was one of those maps that was perfect under the right conditions. Put 24 or 32 players on Rush and it was incredible. Jump to 40 or 64 and then perhaps the experience goes rapidly in the other direction. It's a tricky one. I think there's something that players find fascinating about 32 players just going up against 32 players in the middle of the map, just to find out who comes out on top in the most explosive fashion. Are players really enjoying those maps though, or were they just doing it to get kills and ranks? Who knows? It's a conundrum that perhaps I will never fully understand. And that's all for today, folks. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. Thank you so much. If you didn't like it, dislike it. Subscribe if you want to see more, hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next one.